Okay, so today we are going to be talking about arrays. So arrays allow us to store multiple values in a list in JavaScript. That may not mean a whole lot until we get into it, but that's our starting point. And today we're going to be using candy bars and vending machines as in a lot of our examples. So this should make you hungry. Okay, so JavaScript arrays allow us to store multiple values together, kind of like how vending machines can hold lots of individual snacks in one container. So the first thing we're going to talk about is creating arrays and then how we can add to arrays. So what I'd like you guys to do to follow along with the lesson today is instead of creating a new file or getting set up in CodePen or StackBlitz, we're just going to do this directly in the browser. So if you have the lesson plan open to follow along, or if you have any Chrome window open, just go ahead and right click and then click inspect to open up the developer tools. You can also just go ahead and do the Command Option J. Oh, whoops, hold on. There we go. So yeah, Command Option J will toggle that open as well. It's a good keyboard shortcut to learn. So you can clear the console. You can clear the console by typing clear. I think that, oh, I guess you have to invoke that if you want to do it that way. There we go. Or you can do Command K to clear the console as well. And if you don't see the console tab open, go ahead and click the little double arrows here and then make sure you select console. So like if you were in the elements tab, you can go over to console. So you don't need this to be super big right now, whatever size works. So we are going to be writing arrays and writing JavaScript in the console here. And one cool thing about this is that not only can you do just individual lines of JavaScript to see if it works, it does have a memory for as long as this tab is open, basically. So if you declare a variable, for example, let's do test equals I'm a test, and you can go ahead and follow along with this or not if you like. And then if you were to try to call that, you can actually see that it is stored in memory and you can pull that back up. So just using the console is a great playground for testing out little pieces of JavaScript as well. The snippets that we've looked at in the past is a more full-blown, it's a more fully featured way to write files and to edit code, but this is a really, really fast and easy way to test things out. So if you forgot what a method was or like what specific syntax for something in JavaScript was, you can pull this open and kind of like test it out if you're like, oh, I kind of remember what it was. It's a good place to do that kind of work. So this is where we're going to be working for the most part. I'm going to go ahead and clear that. And what we're going to do for starters here is we're going to create an array. So to create an array, let's assign it to a variable, a constant. Let's do const arr is very common, and we're going to do just an empty array. What an empty array looks like is an open square bracket and then a closed square bracket. So the square brackets is really the basis of our syntax for arrays. If we hit enter there, we have now assigned an empty array to the variable arr. So if we type arr, it's going to spit that back out. And a quick note on how this works, just typing a variable name or a function name is basically the same as using a console log. The only difference is that we're already in the console, so you don't have to actually write out console.log and then the variable name, because this is where we already are. So you'll notice the output is identical to what we get if you just call the name of something that's in memory. Cool. So we've created an array. We see it has a little drop-down arrow next to it. That has a length of 0, and then this proto property that we'll talk about later on. But basically, there's nothing in here. This is an empty array that we've created. So far, let me back up a little bit here. So far in our lessons, everything we've been doing, we have only been assigning variables to a single value. So every time we assign a variable, like let's say we do const snack, and a snack equals Twix. So if we were to do this, we have created a single variable with a single value. So the string Twix is the only value that is assigned to this. If we create a new one called slot, that is a number that is assigned to a number 18, and we do slot, that is a single number assigned to a single variable. Even if we were to concatenate those, so we were to do let name equal snack plus do a little string concatenation here. Snack plus slot. This, even though we have combined two variables together, still the name variable, the variable name, sorry, that's kind of a poor naming there. But the variable name is one value. It is just the string Twix 18. So no matter what we do with the variables and values that we've been learning so far, they're always just one single value. They only contain one specific value. They can't contain a multitude, even if you combine variables together. So this is where arrays come in. So we created a empty array that doesn't have anything in it. But what this is going to allow us to do is to store multiple values that will retain their individuality together inside of a container. All right, let's put some values, some candy bars inside of this array that we created. So I'm just going to clear that out, type R again so we can see it. And what we're going to do is let's create a new array, and we're going to assign it to a variable candy bars. So const candy bars equals, and then we're going to do our array syntax, which is bracket bracket. And I usually like to finish out the full complete syntax to like make a valid statement here before I start writing things in here. So I do the open and closing bracket and then sometimes throw the semicolon on there, and then I'll start writing values in here. So let's do strings for this, and let's write some candy bars. So whatever candy bars you can think of, or any food or anything you want, you can build this out however you like. So here we have another new piece of syntax. So after we've added an item in here, a value, and in this case, it's a string, our first value has been added, and then we do a comma and then a space to be able to add our second and third and fourth values into this array. So we're going to start with that, and we're going to do a comma, and we're going to add some more. So we're going to do Snickers. We are going to do Bounty. We are going to do Mars bar for the Europeans that aren't here. And we're going to do a nut roll for Martin and Will Gress.
I literally did nut roll as well because of that.
Who got the nut roll? All right, sweet. Okay, so we have an array that contains some candy bars in it. So let's go ahead and hit enter now and type candy bars to log out the value of what this variable is and what's in memory. So we see that we have an array, and we actually see a little parentheses here given to us from Chrome. So we see there are 5 items in the array that we just created. We have Twix, we have 5 strings. We have Twix, Snickers, Bounty, Mars, and Nut Roll. So this is pretty awesome. We're going to see how we can use this to get things out of it, to set values, to add more in there, and to just store things. So this is a really, really powerful tool that is really important to JavaScript development, is being able to store multiple values in a single container. Alrighty. So now we contain multiple items.
Hey, real quick, how do you make the console off to the right side, not in how do? So
you're gonna hit the dot dot.
That okay, I literally just found it. Never mind.
And you're gonna adjust dock side.
Thank you.
You can also do separate window where it pops open in a totally separate window. So this is kind of cool. The only problem with this is if you click back to your other window, it like disappears. So I like having it usually docked to the right hand side. Depends on what you're doing though. Like if you're working on a page layout and the full width of the page is important, then putting it on the bottom is helpful. So it's nice being able to switch that around. There's actually probably a keyboard shortcut for this that I never use or I don't have bound, but yeah, just like that. Alrighty, cool. So we have created some candy bars here, but we don't know what to do with them yet. We don't really know how to get these things out or how to access them. There's a gift of a monkey. This monkey, they give him money and he puts money in a vending machine and then he pushes the right button and he gets out a little juice and then he drinks the juice. It's awesome. I encourage you to look that up. But this one is a little preview of that monkey gift. Okay. So we're going to talk about accessing array items and how we can get these items out. So before we get items out of our array, it's important to know how JavaScript understands the location of each item in here. So there's something called zero-based indexing that sounds more complicated than it is. it basically means that when JavaScript looks at an array, it starts counting at 0. It doesn't start counting at 1. Now, that might not really make a lot of sense, but in the context of negative and positive numbers, it makes sense for the language. And we just have to remember to think that way when we're accessing values and getting things out of our arrays. So what this really looks like is basically Twix is 0, Snickers is 1, Bounty is 2, Mars is 3, Nutroll is 4, on and on. So it just starts at 0. So just remember, when you're working with arrays, you start counting at 0 when you're worried about, when you're trying to get the location of something. So JavaScript understands the location of Snickers as 1, not as 2. That's what a zero-based index is. So if we wanted to get the Snickers bar out of this array, what we would do is we would do candy bars, and then we would do brackets, square brackets, just like how we created our array in the first place. And then inside the square brackets here, we are going to put in what's called the index. So we said this is a zero-based index is how JavaScript counts these, or how it looks for these things. And then the index is the actual address itself. So the address, or the location for Snickers, is just the number 1, the index of 1. And you'll see Chrome actually gives us a little preview there too, which is kind of cool. So, but we can go ahead and hit enter and run that, and that's going to spit out Snickers. So our array has remained intact. Nothing has really changed in our array, but we were able to access one specific string value inside of this array. Now, what we would actually want to do to make this useful is probably assign this string value, whatever is at this index, to a variable. So let's create a new variable. You can make it a constant. We're going to call it favorite. And we're going to assign that to candy bars at the index of 1, semicolon. So now, and you can make it whatever you want, whatever candy bar or thing you put in there that you prefer. So now when we log out favorite, that has been assigned to the value that is at the index of 1 within our candy bars array. So this is how you'll often see items within an array being used and manipulated and put into memory this way, by assigning variables to them. Great. So we got our Snickers bar out, and we use the square bracket syntax to tell JavaScript what index our string or whatever item we want to get out is where it is. Okay, so let's talk about another important property of an array.
Sorry, I have a question real quick.
Yeah, what's up?
So I messed up and I spelled something wrong, and it said that, and I tried to assign or put const to favorite equal candy bars. It said identifier favorite has already been declared. Is there a way to reset that or something?
Yeah, definitely. So you'll notice that we're pulling things out of memory here by calling them. So when I say favorite, I just assign favorite up here, and then I call it here. So it has the runtime for what's happening right now is within the browser tab. And remember that const variables can only be declared one. You can't reassign a constant. That's like the whole purpose of a constant. So if it was a let, it would allow you to reassign a let. So you could do one of two things. You could just use lets if you want to change stuff around, or you can just refresh the page. I think refreshing the page will totally clear that out, and you can start over. And I'll just Slack this to you so you can copy and paste that.
That's
really quick.
I was just curious if there's a trick for that, but I'm good.
Yeah, just refresh the page to clear that out, to basically get rid of the memory for all your constants, and then you can just use let. Maybe I should do this example with let. So if you want to use let throughout this, that's totally fine.
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so another really important piece of what we get built in with arrays in JavaScript here is the length property. So you'll actually notice that whenever we printed out our array, or the variable assigned to our array, we see parentheses with a number right before the array. And this actually is giving us a preview and telling us what the length of the array is. So by default, it's telling us that candy bars is actually 5 long. And if you click this little triangle to the left-hand side, it will open it up and give us a drop-down arrow that expands our array and tells us what where everything is and what's inside of it, which is pretty cool, especially if this is a really, really long array. It will do an ellipsis to kind of close it off so you don't, it's not going to print a million item long array here. It'll stop it, and then you can open it up if you want. So we see it gives us our index on the left-hand side, which is cool, and it tells us the length. So you'll notice that the index stops at 4, but the length is still 5. So although the address of each item that's inside of an array starts with a 0-based index, when JavaScript is counting how long an array is or how many items are inside of it, it does realize that there is 1 Twix, 2 Snickers, 3 Bounty. So it's just how many items are inside of the array is what goes into the length property. The length property is not a 0-based thing. The length property is just how many items are inside of the array. So I don't want that to be confusing, that the length is 4, or sorry, the last index is 4, but the length is actually 5. That's because it's just counting how many are in there, but the address starts with a 0-based index.
And that's, so it uses base 10, right? Is that so? Because doesn't base 10 start at 0?
Oh, interesting. I honestly don't know that much about it, Martin, about base 10.
Okay.
What was that? Sorry, I was texting Kristen about coffee.
Oh, I was just saying, I think it's technically what it's called is base 10, right? Where it starts from 0 to 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the the index can go through much higher than that. But yeah, technically it is base 10 because it is values between 0 and 9.
Cool.
Yes.
Cool. 0-based indexed, base 10. Perfect. Apparently I didn't research that well enough. Alrighty. Okay. So the way that we can get our length property, the way that we can access that is by using a method called length. And when we run this, it just returns us a number of what the actual length of the array is. And sorry, it's not a method. This is just a property, the length property. So candybars.length, we first put the name of our array, and then we do dot length, which is great. And you can actually just do that directly on an array, because remember, candy bars is just assigned to the array. So if you were to do, 1, 2, 3, just create an array right here on the fly, and then do dot length, you can still get the length because you're calling that directly on the array. That's basically how we use that length property. Okay, so the length property is most valuable when it's used for iteration and looping, which is something we haven't talked about yet. That's going to be its own complete lesson. So don't worry, we'll get to it. But the length property is very, very valuable, especially when it comes to that. But for now, we can also use the length property to get the last item out of an array. So we'll use an example of how we can use the length property without doing iteration. So to do that, what we could do is let's see. So our last item in our array is the nut roll, naturally. So if we wanted to get that out, the index of nut roll is 4, but the length of the array is 5. So the last item in our array is always going to be the length minus 1. So we can actually use that and pass that into the brackets when we're calling an index to get that last item out. So if we do candy bars, and then we do brackets for the index, and then for the index in here, we can actually put an expression. And for the expression, what we're going to do is this is going to look a little weird, but we're going to do candy bars dot length, because remember, this just evaluates to a number. So candy bars dot length is just 5. So now we're creating an expression in here that is 5. We're going to do minus 1. And the spaces in here aren't super important. I personally like this, where there's a space before and then the minus and the number together. Martin, how do you normally do this? Would you do a space between the minus and the number?
Yeah, I usually do a space between each character, but that's just like, yeah, I mean, tomato, tomato. Everyone's got their different thing.
Yeah, I'm not basing this off of Linter or anything. That's just my preference, but cool. Yeah, we can do it that way. Whatever's more legible for you or makes more sense. So basically what's going to happen here, spoiler alert, Chrome gave us a preview, but what's going to happen is that between these brackets, it's going to evaluate this first. It's going to say, okay, candy bars that length, that's a number. Ooh, I see an operator, the subtraction operator. And then we see the number 1. So this is going to get evaluated down to 4 first. And then that is used as the index that is being called on the array. So when we run this, we get nut roll, because that's basically the exact same thing as writing this.
So why would you go through the trouble of, like, I'm just thinking from like being lazy. Like, why would you write out all of that when you could just do candy bars with an array of 4 instead of doing candy bars dot.
Absolutely. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So the reason you would do this is because this is kind of the difference between having something hard coded and having something dynamic. So candy bars at the index of 4 is called hard coded, which means it can never change. Only the 4th item will ever get returned back to you. And it only works and it's only useful if you're looking at the array as you're writing the code, right? So we know that nut roll is at index 4. So if we wanted to get that back, we could just put the index of 4 in there. And this is one of the failures of a contrived example, is that it might be more difficult to see how this is useful in the real world. But normally arrays are dynamic. So let's say you are a Instagram user and you have your favorites. Whenever you are, clicking hearts and you can go access your favorites that you've liked in the past, let's say that's stored in an array. It's probably stored in something more complex like an object, but for example, there's an array in there somewhere that's probably being used. So that is totally dynamic. The developer, the programmer who wrote that code doesn't know what you're going to, like. So the array of all of the things you've liked is being dynamically populated. So if they wanted to get the very last item and, pop that out to display on some dashboard or something, you could access it with this, because they don't know what you put in there last, but they could do candy bars.length -1 to get or like Sean's liked items, as an array. So that gives it dynamic possibility rather than hard coded. So I'll also show a quick little divergence here to talk about something else. So candy bars.length -1 could look a little confusing. What I would suggest is to use variables to make this more legible to other developers as we go. So if we wanted to actually do this, what I would say is I would create a variable called last, and then that variable is going to be candy bars.length, and you could even just throw the -1 in there. So now last is just the number 4. So then if you did candy bars bracket the variable last, which has evaluated to 4, it's exactly the same, but that's more legible, right? So if you were to read through the code and you were like candy bars bracket candy bars.length -1, it was a little bit of cognitive effort, but pretty quickly you can understand what's happening. Now candy bars bracket last and bracket, you don't even have to understand, the naming of things is descriptive of what the code is doing. So I would argue that this is a more preferable way to do it, because then you're kind of offloading some of that cognitive load to good variable names. So that's how I would do that. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions or clarifications or anything else? Okay, great. So I'm going to go down a quick rabbit hole here to talk about something. So if you have anybody who's worked on arrays in the past is probably aware of a property or a method called pop. So arrays have multiple different methods and properties on them. The reason that I'm using a different term for method and property, and you'll notice I corrected myself when we were talking about length here to say this is not a method, this is a property, is because a method is basically a function. At its core, a method is a function. So you're going to see, parentheses to invoke or to call a method, whereas a property is just this is not a function. It is, there is some kind of functionality down the line, but it's not something that we would invoke. So if you were to try to do candy bars.length and invoke it, is to say this is not a function. So if length was a method, it would be something you invoke. But because it's just a property, it's just that on its own. So they are different, and I just wanted to be specific about what we were talking about. Okay, that was a rabbit hole of the other rabbit hole, and now I kind of forgot where I was going. What was I talking about? Oh, I was talking about pop. That's what it was. Okay, sorry, clearing my console here. So there is a method called pop that you can call on an array. Now, this will give you the last item in an array. So you may be thinking, okay, cool. Why in the world would I ever do candy bars index of candy bar -1 if I could just use pop? And the reason is, and this may be a little confusing, but so we don't need to go too much into it, but the reason it has to do with destructive manipulation. And basically what I mean is that when we type out candy bars now to look at our array, it has changed. You see that? Nut roll is gone. The nut roll is completely gone. So what we have done is when we called pop, we removed nut roll from our original array. So it's actually changed the original array in memory of JavaScript. So there's a couple that we could create a copy of candy bars and then call that pop method on it to pop something out. But I just wanted to let you know that pop doesn't just find the last item and tell you what it is. It removes it from the original array. It mutates is another word you'll hear a lot. It mutates the array and changes it. So be very careful when you're using that pop method. And that's where the index -1, the dot length -1 can actually be handy to get the index. So pop does that. So let's fix candy bars. And another little preview here. There's another method called push that will also manipulate the array. And we could put nut roll back in there. Or you guys want to put a different candy bar? Name me your favorite candy bar. We're gonna put both of them in. Sean, what's your candy bar?
Reese's.
Is that a candy bar? I don't know if there's a candy bar.
That's pretty good.
Sean's face.
Mine's Three Musketeers, probably.
You
Okay.
spelled that wrong, Michael.
Did I really?
Recess. I love recess.
Recess. How do you spell re? Is it two E's on both ends of the C?
I know it's an S in the middle.
Is it really? Reese's
Yeah.
Feces. Okay.
Reese's Pieces.
All right. So what index is your Reese's at then? So Reese's at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's another fun way we could actually do that to find it. We'll talk about later, but 4. Okay, so that's index of 4. So what we could do here is if we say candy bars index of 4, which is Reese's, we can actually change it by using this reassignment operator here. So let's change it to what it's actually. Okay, how is it? There's no C in Reese's? Huh. I've been living a lie.
Haven't you ever had one before?
Yeah, I have. I didn't look very carefully at what it's called, I guess. All right, sweet. So we did a little array manipulation here, which was fun to fix that stupid problem, that stupid mistake of mine. Great. Okay, now we have everybody's items in here. And you'll notice too that Martin's is a good example because it actually has a space inside of it. So even though there's a space here, this is just a string. So this could be as many words as you want. This is a single value as one string at the last item of the array. Okay, cool. So we have done a little bit more work on our array here to see how things work. Let's see, we talked about the push. Well, we just did a quick example of the push method, but we didn't really talk a ton about it. But yeah, so the push method is also will also change our array. It will mutate the array similar to how pop does, but it allows us to push items inside of it. So this was actually what we were going to talk about next. So kind of already went over that. So how to push an item into the array. One thing to note is that when we use push, the push method, and it's a method because it is a function, and we invoke it here with the parentheses. Let's put a different one in here. Let's do KitKat. Okay. So when we do this, push ends up putting whatever you passed into it as an argument at the end of the array. So it pushes it onto the end instead of the front. There is another method you can use to put it in the front. But just good to know that push is commonly used, and push will throw it right to the end. Good to know about how push works. And then pop will pop that same one off. Okay, searching an array, sweet. So there's another method we can use that is really handy, and it's something called indexOf. And this is a way that we could search for things within our array. Did I have oh no, I thought I might have a slide for that. Okay. Is this monkey gif getting old that we've been staring at?
This monkey is so long.
I know it's true. Okay, we'll switch over to this.
Question, Michael. So
Yeah, what's up?
pushing, is there a way to put it in a certain spot, or is it always going to be at the end? If I was like, I want this one to be the third option.
Yeah, so there actually may be more ways than I'm aware of, but
Wouldn't it make most sense to just use splice, since that method has all those parameters kind of baked in, and that's what it's for?
yeah. Let's check that out. So if we do candy bars dot splice, and I may not remember all of these, but this is actually kind of cool that Chrome gives you some of these like parameters that go inside of it. So we see it's a function, then we see where it starts, and then we see, so the question mark basically means it's an optional parameter. So we need to have start, and then the delete count, and then the spread operator on items, which basically means there can be as many as you want in the third parameter. So we want to start at index of let's see, 1, right? Because we want to start with Snickers. So let's actually see what that does to candy bars. Okay, so that dropped the, what did that do?
Everything.
Oh, that's interesting.
If you don't give it anything, it just removes at that index, and it only will like create an array with only those, like that thing at that index. If you don't give it anything else, it's like, okay, you only want that item at that index. Or if I think it technically will start at the index afterwards, and if you don't give it anything to add or remove, it just takes everything before the index you give it.
So
Okay.
it just took everything. It just took everything after Twix out, pretty much.
Yeah. So the first item isn't the index then, right? Because that just gave us the
because you only passed it 1, it started at index of 1, and then you didn't give it anything to remove or add, and so it took everything out past index of 1, starting at index of 1.
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense. Why did that give us Twix back?
Because
if you look up on candy bars when you logged it out, when there's 7 items, Twix is
0. I see.
So
I see.
Yeah,
you're right.
Starting at 1.
Okay, sorry, I'm an idiot. Yep, I see what you're talking about. Okay, yeah. So let's just go back and double check. So let's go to trusty old MDN. Honestly, I mix up splice, slice, and split all the time. Those are 3 array methods that I constantly have to Google because they sound similar and I forget what they all do. Okay, sweet. So we have const months. We have some months in this array. We do months.splice 1, 0, feb. Okay, so inserts at index 1, console.log month. So we have January, February, March, April, June. Awesome. So that is exactly what you wanted to do, Sean, which is splice.
Yep.
That's
So
the best way to do it.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, so the second argument, the second parameter is the delete count, which is 0. So you want to delete nothing. Interesting. So it's funny that the default, if you don't pass it a second parameter, it just deletes everything after the index of what the first argument you passed in. Okay, and then
yeah,
I think
it's because you don't give it any items to add to it, so it just assumes that you're removing everything.
Awesome, I love that. So if we wanted to just add something in here, we need to pass in 3 arguments to this. So let me reset candy bars. Sorry, hold on. Let's go back to our 7 here. Okay, I'm going to copy this, and I'm actually going to refresh the page because it's going to throw an error on that constant unless I do that. Bunch of crapola. Okie dokie. Equals, perfect. Okay, just getting back to where we were before. Oh shoot, sorry guys, we lost some of those other ones. Let's do it with a Z and put in everything. There we go. Okay, now we got all our stuff back. So what we can do is if we use our new method that we just learned about, .slice.
Slice or splice?
I think you're going to use
Oh,
splice.
whoops. I already forgot which one it was. All right, .splice. Okay, and we are going to start at index of 1.
And then
And
0.
Yep, we're going to delete nothing. And we want to add in, what was it again, Sean? Oh, Milky Way.
Milky Way. But so
Yeah.
Sean's bar equal Milky Way. Can I just call Sean's bar in there?
Oh, you know what? That's exactly what you would want to do, but I refreshed the page. So yeah, let me copy this, and then we won't do that yet because we want to do const Sean's bar. Sean's
burn
equals Milky Way.
Oh, hell yeah.
So now we can drop that in there. So we can put in Sean's bar. Awesome. I love it. So now candy bars. Did we do that? Oh, it inserted it. Oh, we lost Kit Kat though. Oh, whoops. I'm sorry. Dang it. This is so stupid. I did it in the wrong one. I have 2 arrays. Candy bars with the Z. All right, there we go. So my mistake was that I put it at index 1 instead of index 2. So if I wanted to put it after Snickers, oh, okay. I was mistaken. I thought that this index was like which item it comes after, but that's the index you actually insert it at.
Yeah, you're telling. Okay, that's cool.
0, 1. Yep, cool.
That seems way easier than the other way you try to explain it.
Yeah, exactly. Because yeah, the other way would be like splitting the array apart and then adding, which is basically what splice does already. Yeah, that's awesome. This is one of those methods that you like when you need it, it's super duper handy, but I forget the syntax for it all the time. So
thank you for going down this rabbit hole.
Oh no, absolutely. This is the fun like part of learning these things is that there's, you know, all these methods that you know about, and a lot of the time there'll be something like, oh, I know that it's one of like 3 or 4 things that I need to do this right now, and then you take, you know, you need to solve it with a specific thing, you know, kind of how to get there. You Google it, you figure it out, you put it in, and hopefully you remember a little bit more syntax than the last time, which hopefully I also remember that. Okay, let's go back to our monkey, right? Our monkey gif. All righty, array contents. Sweet. So we talked about searching an array. We didn't go over that a ton, but basically index of, well, if you call the index of method on an array, it will tell you the index of whatever you pass into it. So you could search for Milky Way now, and it would, if we do candy bars with a Z, dot index of, and we look for a Milky Way, then that's going to return the index of 1. It's also important to note that capitalization is always really important. So if you actually don't capitalize that correctly, it will not find it. So it's looking very specifically for that string with caps and then lowercase. Sweet. So Milky Way is at the index of 1 now. And that's how we can search for things. Sweet. Okay, the last note that I had that I wanted to talk about is kind of basic array stuff, but arrays can contain really anything. Mixed is what I'm going to call this. So we're going to create an array here that has numbers. It's going to have a string. It's going to have another array, an empty array. It's going to have an array that contains other arrays, another nested array here that has another string in it. Nested, things like this. It's going to have a Boolean, another Boolean, and then we're gonna, oh shoot, I missed something. Am I missing a closing bracket? There we go. So we can look at this array. This is a valid array, and it has a ton of random stuff in it. And this is something that a lot of folks like dislike about JavaScript, that it is so flexible and you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with this. I know that generally you would have an array that only contains numbers, or an array that only contains strings. You can even put functions inside of an array, or objects, which we're going to talk about in the future here. But arrays can be mixed together. They do not have to be just one specific type. So that is something that's important to note, is that arrays are very flexible in what they can contain, and they can contain other arrays.
Question. So the fourth, in the first array, you had 12 string, then you did another array, and then you did, what is that, the fourth thing you did in there?
So that is an array with another array inside of it. So,
but it's only 3 square brackets. So how is that?
So this is the opening bracket for an array, and then the first item in this array is an empty array, and then the second item in this array is an array with a string nested inside of it, and then the third item is a Boolean true. The fourth item is a Boolean false.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? These are all. It's because I messed up the brackets. These are all part of this one here, and this is kind of cool because if you do the drop down arrow, this is how it'll lay it out a little bit more for you. So now that we've created this, we see that index 0 is 12, index 1 is string, index 2 is an array with nothing in it, index 3 is an array that has another empty array, and then an array with nested, and then 2 Booleans, and then that's it. So these, you can actually open up the way that these things are nested using that. So this is where Chrome comes in really handy, because obviously you can see how this is much easier to read and navigate than trying to just look at this. Because once you get into bracket land and you're like, okay, wow, I'm trying to track where everything is. This is a good way to see that. Does that make sense, Sean?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Visually, this is very confusing. And that's where this can come in handy. So. Very cool. All right, so we are on to the homework now. So what we're going to do for homework is we're going to be creating a false quote attributor called Iffy Quotes. You can name it something else if you want to. But basically, we're going to use arrays to pull random images, quotes, and authors or attributions to put together this image here, or put together a little goofy poster that will generate random things. So we're going to click a little shuffle button. So there's some JavaScript down here. And then when you shuffle, it's going to shuffle the text, it's going to shuffle the background image, and it's going to shuffle the attribution. So we're going to be working specifically with 3 different arrays, primarily the array for the text, for the quote, the array that's going to contain the image URLs here for this background, and then the array that contains the text or the strings of different authors. We're going to write some JavaScript so that on a click event here, we trigger a function that then shuffles all this stuff. There is a new piece of JavaScript we're doing here that is a randomization code, basically. And in the homework, which we can actually look at right now, it'll walk you through what you need to know to learn that randomization functionality and those methods, those new browser methods. So when you shuffle, it just gives you random stuff. And then you can also add in a new one if you want. And when you click shuffle, it will automatically pop that one into the next one. So some of this is more stretch goals if you wanted to add those in. Most importantly is just working with arrays and especially getting the shuffle button to work. So then now, eventually we'll come back to Sean's. It can add that text that we just typed in into the array. So now we get this coming back up. So now it gets added into the randomization. Shawnee Boy just refinished his kitchen with the Shire, add gain. Love it. If you have the lesson plan pulled up, at the very bottom, there will be a link under the homework heading that says fork and clone the array homework repository and follow the steps in the README and app.js file. So if we go over there, let me bring this back over onto this side. So when we click on that link, it's going to take you to the Iffy Quotes repo. So now we're in Iffy Quotes, and you're going to create your own Iffy Quotes. Specifically, go ahead and we're going to do a fork and clone of this repo. because instead of doing this in kind of an open source model where you're going to submit a pull request to merge it back into this repo here, we'll just have you go ahead and leave it under your own name, so you can push your changes up to your space. So it'll be like Sean McKnight / Iffy Quotes or Martin Cartledge / Iffy Quotes. And then if you want to, we can actually go through trying to get that published as well. So we can actually put it on the web using GitHub Pages. So we could deploy your site with your own Iffy Quotes if you like. So go, if you do get this pulled open though, the steps that we're going to really step through here are in the app.js file. So you're going to fork this over to your own space, and then you're going to clone it down to your machine. And then once you're in your machine, you're going to open up that app.js file, and it's going to give you another note saying make sure you forked it, not just cloned it. And from here, all of the instructions for the homework are inside of the JavaScript document you're going to work in. So there's comments, and underneath each comment is where you are going to write your code. So this, for example, says create variables to assign to the DOM elements you'll be working with. Start with text, image, and attribution. So underneath here on line 7 is where you would be writing that code. Oh, sorry, on line 9, because I guess we give a freebie for starters. So this is what the text one is going to look like, for example. So then you're going to need to do image and attribution to add in there. And the only last thing I wanted to show you guys is we talked about some randomization and how we're going to create randomness in our application. We're going to use something called math.random and then another method called math.floor. And using those two mixed with array.length is going to allow us to get some randomization out of our arrays. And this walks us through everything here of how this is going to work. And it's kind of a little bit of a challenge to say, you know, like this is what this thing does, this is what this thing does. Now put those together so that it will actually randomize everything. And if this is a struggle, or if this is tough and you can't get this to work, at the very bottom of the file is a little preview. Is the code you can copy and paste for the math.random function if you can't get this to work. So try to do it yourself so that this function random value from array actually just returns a random value from whatever array you pass into it. And if you can't get that figured out, you can go ahead and copy paste it from the bottom. And we have a function. This is where most of the business is going to live, is in this function called update. And there are also instructions here as to how we can write code so that when the shuffle button is clicked, that we actually update what's happening on the UI. You don't have to write any CSS or HTML for this. All of the CSS and HTML are completed. So you're just writing JavaScript and you'll see your changes on the web page. And then when you're working on this, also remember you can just do open index.html. That's how you're going to open it in the browser, is you're going to type that in the terminal. There's actually something else. Shani, do you have VS Code open right now?
I'm getting there. I just was cloning down the
sweet
Iffy Quotes thing.